My name is Jim. I'm excited to be able to share with you tips, tools, and ideas to hopefully help you become more effective, be able to get more done, and not just more done, but more of the right sort of things done with a lot less stress. Now, I've got some good news and we got some bad news. So the bad news is working from home, managing your time. I cannot teach you how to manage time. So if you want to log off now, please feel free. No, please stay, wait. Can you manage time? Can you put an extra hour in the day? Can you make a minute shorter or longer physically? No, we cannot manage the passage of time. Time management is known as an oxymoron. And some of you entomologists out there know this is a term which is self-contradictory. Examples of oxymorons would be bittersweet, jumbo shrimp, the sound of silence. I'm sure you can come up with lots of others. Used to do a lot of work in insurance companies. They had an interesting one, death benefit. Now, time management is an oxymoron. We cannot manage time. We all have 168 hours in the week. We all have 1,440 minutes in every single day. You see, whether we use it or whether we lose it comes down to some basic principles, tools, ideas, skills, habits that can help us to be able to maximize and optimize the finite resource that we have called time. So that's the bad news. The good news is that if you will take note of, implement some of these ideas, I promise you that you will be able to get more done in less time with less stress. So just in the chat box there for us, please, if you wouldn't mind. Just tell us either a why or a yes or a no. How many of you are up for a bit of that? Getting more done, less time, less stress, please. Just quick in the chat box if you would. Fantastic. Getting some great responses here. In the chat box, we're all getting used to how do we do this? Yes, please, definitely. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Craig, Ashley, wonderful. Carol, oh, yep, absolutely. Nathan, brilliant, brilliant team, fantastic. You see, over the last 30 plus years, I've had the privilege and pleasure of being able to share this material all over the planet. And from my own observation and life experience, I know this stuff works. I'm not into trainer speak or flip chart talk. Bob and I, we deal with the real world and some of the stuff and this new normal that we're going to deal with. We're going to have a look at that. So let's have a look. Some of the real key benefits of working from home. Well, one of the big ones is time. I mean, some of you guys used to spend hours commuting and all the stress has gone. Oh, wonderful. So we have this wonderful gift. Now, how are we redirecting that time? And so the challenge of time management working from home is slightly different than working in the office. Also, some of the upside of working from home, all the calories that you're saving from all those unhealthy lunches. Now you're able to craft your own lunch at home, save a bunch of money in the process. So there's a number of key benefits. That's just a few. I'm sure that you could think of many, many more. And look at, some of us are getting to box sets of Netflix, I know, at working from home. But please, we'll look at some of our enemies as well. But some of the typical challenges, some of the potential downside here, well, one of them is kind of this. Do any of you relate to any of those images? Some of the mental distractions in your kitchen, around your home, your garden on a wonderful sunny day when you're looking out at it and you think, oh, I'd rather be doing that. That's not my garden, by the way. But also now 24/7 in and around our loved ones, we're spending a significant amount more time in their space when they're not used to it, and maybe we're not used to it. So some real challenges in terms of some of the emotional impacts that we need to look at to protect ourselves, our productivity, our performance, as well as not alienating our nearest and dearest. And then how do we get the work done? Well, we're all becoming very used to Zoom here. And if you're not navigating on Zoom, we can point you in the right direction to some wonderful self-tutorials just go on to YouTube, and some great stuff there. But Bob and I have had to upskill over the last month or so as well in terms of using this platform. So looking at how we manage the digital environment. It can be the digital environment, the WhatsApp, the Facebook groups, the Teams chats, the Zoom meetings, all of this technology. It can be a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. And so some of the downsides, some of the different challenges we're going to look at in terms of working from home. Now, this is Be More Effective. We're not a one-hit wonder. So there are, if you stick with us for the duration of the webinar, got a little survey at the end. We got some freebies, some extra information, which will help you take it to the next level. If you want a deeper dive as a one-to-one, I can do that with you. And we're offering that at the end of the, so stick with us and take advantage of some of these free bonuses as well. What I do want to do is hopefully leave you better than when we found you. Hopefully with some information and maybe a bit of inspiration to be able to help us to become more proactive rather than reactive. And I want you to be wise. So how do you define wisdom? I agree with Plato. The beginning of wisdom is in the definition of terms. So what does wisdom mean? How would you define it? Well, my definition of wisdom is knowledge correctly applied. It's not what you know. It's what you do with what you know. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if we don't use any of it, fat lot of use. So if you just pick up 1, 2, 3, 4 ideas and implement them, fantastic. You will be a very wise person. Now, a lot of this stuff that we're going to share with you is a lot of common sense. It is not, as my friend Albert would say, rocket science. So the challenges I've found in life and work is common sense is not necessarily common practice. So we're gonna have to stick with this, develop some new habits, get out the comfort zone for some of us, but I promise you again, you'll be able to get more done, less time, less stress, if you apply some of this. So with that thought in mind, hopefully you've got a writing device, either digital or paper and pen to hand, that you can capture your ahas. These are the blinding flash of the perfectly obvious, the aha. That's nothing to do with a Norwegian pop group from the 1980s for some of us old geezers out there. But this is that blinding flash of the perfectly obvious. Yeah, aha, that's that light bulb. Write that one down. Not necessarily note down what I say, but what you think as a result of what has been said. So with that thought in mind, we will be sharing, you don't need to make lots of notes about the slide deck. We will send you this as a follow-up as well. So just be writing down or capturing your ahas and it will start to make a difference. What I thought about when I looked at working from home, there are 4 critical resources that you and I need to really look to preserve, renew, and enhance. Our attitude, mindset is everything. What are we doing to be able to preserve, renew, and enhance our mindset and our attitude, our focus, our attention? You see, the main thing is to keep the main thing, the main thing. Again, working from home, that can be a bit of a challenge. Keeping our energy levels, not only physically, but intellectually, psychologically, emotional energy, and time. You see, time without energy will be devoid of value. So all of these 4 elements, and if I was doing a one-to-one coaching session with you, and if you want to develop this and that free 30-minute call with us, we're more than willing to do that, is just ask you to ponder the question. So with regards to those 4 resources, critical resources, what am I currently doing to preserve, renew, and enhance all of those? Maybe a rhetorical question for now, but one that we can maybe come back to a little bit later on. Now I've got a poll for you, so I'm going to, hopefully the technology will work here. So this poll, very quickly, don't waste a lot of gray cells responding to these things, make it intuitive, do it as quickly as you can, and then we'll share with you the, the findings of this. So in terms of doing your best work from home, what are the sorts of things that are preventing you? We've got 5 let me launch this poll for you, and hopefully you've got 5 options here. And allow to vote. Off we go. So we'll just give you a couple of seconds to respond. See how many are voting. All right, excellent. We've got 10, 11, 12. Another couple of seconds just to get everybody's input on this. Which of these is really a real issue for us working from home? So I got 24 out of 30. We've got 30 people on the line. Thank you for making this an investment, and I hope it will be an investment, not an expenditure. So we got 24. We got 80. Okay, just another couple of seconds, please, if I may. If you haven't voted, vote now. Okay, I'm going to close that one down and see what we've got here. So share these results. So what do we come out with, team? We got 44% of us distractions. That's the big one there. And then the next place, dealing with interruptions, which is another form of distraction, I would suggest to us. Procrastination, that we all suffer it from varying degrees. Stress is interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. That didn't come out too much for some of us. And then nearly 20% of us, all of the above. Okay, well, thank you for your input there, team. That's very helpful and actually in line with some of the stuff that we've designed here for you to help you walk away with some tools to deal with all of those elements. So stick with us, and let's move that out of reach. And the technology, thank you very much. Zoom, excellent. So let me ask you to do a bit of a reality check with yourself and maybe with others here. You see, the reality is we've got to manage expectations in terms of our deliverables within the constraints that we're working in, different constraining factors working from home as opposed to working in the office. Nobody does it all. Nobody, not your CEO, not Boris, not anybody is doing it all. And so we really do need to rein in some of our expectations, be very specific about the deliverables and be realistic about your expectations. When I coach executives around the world, one of the things is these A-type personalities, they've got this mega to-do list and all these goals, all these visions, all these aspirations, which is great, but you've got to rein it in terms of what am I going to do? So we've got to let go of perfection. And so the perfect can be the enemy of the good, and particularly in these days of COVID. So we've got to rein in some of our personality profile here, possibly in terms of getting the right sort of things done and being considerate of the other key stakeholders as well. Now, the visual on the screen, you can see this is the not equal sign. So I'm going to put up an equation here for you from my mentor of years, Dr. Stephen Covey, the author of the fantastic best-selling business book ever, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Not equal sign. So what are we saying? Urgent does not equal important. Urgent does not equal important. However, can I also suggest that important things are not necessarily urgent? I want to develop that for you. So what's the dictionary definition of an urgency? An urgency is something that just kind of jumps out at you, demands your immediate attention. I mean, why do you answer the phone? Because it rings. Usually we don't answer non-ringing phones. Hi, is anybody there? Trying to be proactive, perhaps. So, you know, think about the office environment back in the day when we used to be in the office. You sat at your desk, you're working away, and your boss's boss's boss walks into your presence. What's the physical presence of that person saying to you? Maybe apart from that they're lost, I don't know. But we don't need to worry about the urgent stuff. It finds us. What we really need to be focused in on, what's really important. Now, if I were to ask you, this is a rhetorical question, do you value your health? 99% of people would say, yes, of course I do. But then I say, what on a regular habitual basis, weekly, daily, are you doing to preserve, renew, and enhance your health? Not so much. So the highly effective individual has identified what's truly, truly, truly important, and then makes it urgent. So what we are going to say yes to, what we say our willpower, yes, I'm going to do that, as opposed to, no, I'm not going to do this. And so it's having that courage, that balance of courage and consideration for ourselves and for others, having that self-compassion, that self-kindness to be able to deal with everything that we're dealing with, this new world order. So a couple of things. I love that quote by Goethe at the bottom of the slide there. As you look at answering this question, professionally and personally, both in the workplace and in the home place, what really matters most to me? What's really important? So a couple of key questions that you could take away after today to look at. You know, what do I really value? I used to say in seminars years ago, you know, you give me 2 books and I'll tell you what you really value. 2 books. You give me your checkbook and you give me your diary and I'll tell you what you really value. Because where we spend our time and where we spend our money actually does reflect in large measure what we really value. At a professional level, why do I get paid? What am I expected to deliver on? And if you're not clear about that, there are issues. You really need to be specific and measurable. On a scale of 1 to 10, you've got to be knocking on a 9 or a 10. You're really clarity around your role and your goals in your role in the business. Again, if there's a lack of clarity there, come back to us. We can have a chat and get into some more detail here. So when we ask people in surveys, you know, so what's on your list of the important things? Have a look at these. I'm sure that you would add some things, maybe different things to your list, but that's a kind of a generic list. Or what are some of those things that truly matter most to us? Yeah. And then what are we doing about it on a regular basis? Now, I mentioned Dr. Covey's 7 habits. This is the 3rd habit of highly effective people. Habit 1 is be proactive. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. And habit 3. And those are what he calls the private victory. Now, on different webinars, we're going to go into some of that material in a little bit more detail. But I'll focus here on what he referred to as his time matrix. He popularized this. Some of you may be familiar with this. Some of you might be using it. And if you're not using it currently, it's a great tool at strategic and tactical level to be able to map out really what's important and what's urgent. You see, we live in 4 boxes, professionally and personally. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what we mean here. So in terms of box 1, the stuff that's important and urgent, these are crises, these are problems, these are accidents, these are stuff that you can't control. Okay, one of the things that are happening right now, we have no control over at a personal level. This global pandemic, I want to come back to here. And if you've ever, why does crisis happen often? Well, in my experience, if you haven't experienced a crisis, then count your blessings. But most of us have to deal with this. And there's about 20% of our day, our week, our life that we have to accommodate stuff that's unplanned for. So some of this stuff might be, you know, you're working from home and you're in the kitchen and you're at the table working, trying to work, and then you see a child reaching out under the hot oven, etc., and you know what next is going to happen. So you've got to stop what you're doing and maybe deal with it. In working from home, that's going to happen. However, we tend to create a lot of our own personal crisis as well. Now, some people can get hooked on adrenaline, that adrenaline junkie, as I call it, in the workplace. And that's okay to a certain extent, but you've got to control it. But as a personal example, I mean, how many of you can relate to this visual? In the wintertime, you see people driving down the road with a 6-inch square of ice. Now, I know none of you would ever do that. However, you know, we're just setting ourselves up for failure and for success. So setting ourselves up for success in a working environment comes down to setting expectations, having conversations with the family in this regard, working from home, and then setting some boundaries, which I want to have a look at. but why do we have so many crises, both in work and in life? You know, we're all being affected by COVID right now. Well, you know, many years ago, they told us that this was going to happen. I mean, Bill and his mates in the scientific world, 2015, Google it, they warned us that this was going to happen. And only a couple of countries in the world, South Korea is one noted one, that took the preventative actions that has saved a lot of lives and a lot of their economy. And so it's sad, but it's true in terms of human nature. We need the wake-up call to be able to start taking care of ourselves, the heart attack, the divorce, the redundancy, something major that forces you to stop. Get off the treadmill and start asking what really matters most. So dealing with box one, it's a reality. So in terms of being able to mitigate that, a couple of questions you could consider. So why did it happen? Brainstorm with yourself and others the possible solutions so that we can mitigate it in the future and then implement that best long-term solution. I will promise you, if you get into that mindset, it will make so much of a difference here. Then we get into this in box three. This is the stuff that's not important to us. It's important maybe to other people, urgent to other people, but it's not important to us. This is box three. This is what I call the box of busy work, distractions. And a number of us in that poll previously said that this was, say if you could relate to some of these interruptions. I mean, at the office space, how many of you have ever had that experience where you're sat at your desk trying to get something done, somebody walks into your space with the mistaken idea that you care? Yeah, what to them is really important to you, not so much. But in the home environment, the interruptions are kind of different. And sometimes you can control some of your environment if you've got the luxury of an extra room where you can shut the door, put a sign on the outside which says leprosy or do not disturb or whatever you like. But in a home environment, the interruptions, the distractions are going to be slightly different, and you need to deal with them. They're not all bad. There are what I call the A-type interruptions. And think about these ABCs of interruptions. The A-type is necessary. You're going to have to stop what you're doing and deal with it. Your key client phones you and says, I need help and I need it now. And so we with that key client, we'll jump into that. Then you have the B's and C's. Necessary but untimely. So you reschedule it. Love to deal with that, darling. Right now, I'm stuck. I need to close off this Zoom meeting here. Hopefully you should have mitigated that before. But if it happens, then deal with it and make sure you have the communication in the future. And but the C type, which is not necessary, not productive. You want to get rid of this. Now, the problem is that people don't announce, hello, I'm a C type interruption. People typically interrupt you with, you know, how are you? Have you got a minute? And that's the sort of thing that tends to happen there. So you're not sure about what's the type of interruption that you're dealing with. So what I would really encourage you is to first be a responsible interrupter. Now, what do I mean by that, Jim? A responsible interrupter interrupts other people responsibly. Think about it. So what are you going to do? You're going to plan the interruption. You're going to think specifically, before I attack Bob with this interruption, it's the ABC project, it's for the board of directors. It's going to probably take about 40 minutes to really talk this through. So when I get into Bob's space, as it were, either digital or otherwise, or on the phone, Bob, sorry to disturb you, mate. I've got this ABC. It's about the board of directors. I need about 40 minutes. Can we do it now? And we have a conversation. So be a responsible interrupter. Think about the medium of communication as well that you are going to set, and be a role model there of effective interruptions for other people, okay? And don't be defeated by this self-fulfilling prophecy, oh, there's nothing I can do in my environment. There's a lot you can do. Apply a bit of common sense and a positive attitude. Communicate, communicate, communicate. some of the expectations, some of the boundaries. And like for Asda, for example, back in the day, when they had it, Wilson Street in Leeds, 600, 700 people, all open plan, they give everybody a red hat. And so the red hat signifies that I'm not to be interrupted. They're allowed 2 hours a day with the hat on. Do some of them look silly? Yeah, some of them feel silly. Probably does it work? It works incredibly well, because in 2 hours of uninterrupted time, you can get a shed load of work done. So be a responsible interrupter first, use a bit of creativity and imagination. Let me know what you come up with on that one, because I know you've got wonderful ideas of how you can save some time. Major distraction here in terms of the ubiquitous tool. I love this emailing tool. However, there's a lot of downside as well. 40% of your day, and that's average, for crying out loud. If I was, again, coaching some of you, one of the things I'd do is a bit of an audit trail, to be able to control the amount of time that this takes for us, so that we're not dialing in at 10, 11 o'clock at night. And obviously, if your business is international and you're kind of following the sun, you've got to manage that, and different time management tools and techniques apply, obviously, in that regard. But if you're in a totally reactive role, for example, where your job is to respond to the emails, I get this. Some of you are not going to be able to apply some of these tools and techniques that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But for the majority of you, be more proactive with email. And we're not talking about doing email, we're talking about processing email. One of the first things you need to do is change the default settings. Rather than when you open up, launch your system, that it defaults into currently inbox. If it does that, you know what happens. You get involved in the emails, you start going down the rabbit warren, and maybe 2, maybe 3 hours later, you emerge. And have you been proactive or reactive? Well, again, we're typically being very reactive. So I would challenge you, if you don't know, I'll show you how, but set the default screen up to default into your calendar, your diary first, before it goes into inbox. Because the calendar, the diary, is the place where you set up your key priorities, your deliverables, and that's what you want to be focused in on, because the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And that title of that slide, yeah, it's a tool to help you to do your job. So please change the mindset. It's just a communication tool. And think about email as you think about hard copy letters that come through your letterbox. Your inbox is the landing, is the letterbox that it comes and it sits there. Now, when you process, and I will give you a free booklet at the end of the webinar if you want to sign up for this, how to get your inbox down to 0, for one of my great colleagues, Graham, and put that together, and you really can start to process your emails. Now, personally, I do it 3 times a day. Don't always hit those timelines, but around about 3 times a day for 10 or 15 minutes, I process emails, getting real control, so that there's ideally 0 in the inbox. I have a place for everything in its place, and the stress is relieved as you process that. So if you're not in control of that right now, then help is at hand. So let's just check in with you. Travis, thank you for that. Appreciate you sharing that. Let's move into our next little bit here. If you haven't already turned off your notifications, please do so. Those constant distractions, interruptions, which are self-inflicted here, what I call the pings and dings, get rid of those. Again, if you don't know, look it up on YouTube, very easy. So that box can be 50% of your day if you're not careful, box 3, the stuff that's important and urgent. You've got to be careful of box 4 here, stuff that's not important and not urgent. You've got to know your enemies. So you can get by the visual here what I'm referring to probably. Yeah, Facebook, on average, 35 minutes a day. Adding value? Don't think so. When you, and that's average. So you do the numbers, that's 24 working hours, 24 8-hour days in a year on Facebook. Now, again, while it's a great tool, and in these days of lockdown and isolation, we're using a lot of more digital platforms. but you need to control it. It should not control you. So know your enemy and then do something about it. We want to stay in box 2 where possible. The stuff that's really important professionally and personally, but it's not urgent. One of those things would be planning and preparing better. Let's have a look at some others. So let me ask you to get involved in a quick poll here with us. And I'll ask you this key question. Just before I launch the poll, let me explain the question. So there's a couple of key words there that I want you to focus in on. Now, I'm asking you particularly about your day. So think about typically your average day. The investment, again, a difference between an expenditure, you get a return on this. If you formally plan your day, formally, that does not include shower time, jogging time, commuting time, though those are great thinking times. What I'm suggesting to you is that with a system, a diary, either digital or analog, I'm really not too fussed, but you've got some sort of system that you're mapping out your priorities, your key tasks, your meetings, appointments, etc. How much time do you spend informally planning your day? And there's a range 1 to 5. Let's launch this poll for you, planning. So please, if you could, don't waste a lot of gray cells thinking about the answer. Typically on average, where am I? Well, thank you, team. Excellent. You're coming in very fast on this one. Brilliant. Okay, we'll give it another few seconds here. So where are we? So we've got, all right, let me give you 3 more seconds if you haven't. So good. Let's close that one down and share these results. Okay. Now, I've done this exercise thousands of times all over the world, and guess what, folks? You replicate exactly where everybody else is. So there's good news and there's some potential downside here that we need to discuss. Now, 0 to 5 minutes. If you can do a quality job, and there's a big question mark behind that statement. If you can do a quality job of planning your day and your week in 0 to 5 minutes, you are a better man than I and many others. Okay, we're going to come back to the average highly effective person needs to invest a significant, now 10 to 15 minutes, 5 to 10, brilliant, well done. I used to do this in a live session. I had one guy say 7 hours. And I said, you what, on average? Yeah, 7 hours. I said, no. And he said, I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm a company planner. And there's always one in the classroom. Anyway, folks, good. Thank you for that. Let's move this on for you. So if I could get you to do nothing else, but do this, it would make a marked and measurable impact in your performance and productivity. Because most people, nearly 80%, don't do what I'm going to ask you to do. But if you will make this commitment, I will promise you, I will guarantee you money back. Well, you're not paying for this. But anyway, here we go. 20 to 30 minutes to plan the week, formal planning. 10 to 15 minutes or maybe more. Now, if you're not used to this, it might take a little bit longer initially here, but the difference is electric. So let's get into what we mean, because the real benefits, this is just a partial list of all of the benefits here, but your reputation precedes you. When you say something's going to happen, it happens on time. Is that worth anything in the marketplace? It's worth everything, because most folks don't do it, sadly. So look at the 4 steps. The beginning of the week, a key place to be able to really map out your week better is select your role and your goals. Think about the roles that you play professionally, personally, and select 1 or 2 things that are going to move the needle for you this week. Whatever system you have, your paperwork, your email, your calendar, dialing back down to the inbox, getting on top of all of that. Thinking backwards as well as forwards. What happened last week? What went well? What did I learn? What maybe not so much? What did I learn, etc. There's a lot of learning that can come out of that investment of time to mitigate future. And then number 4, diarize the week. digitally or analog. Again, I'm not too interested in that. What are the key goals, the key activities, and make sure it's in the diary as an example, not the example, but as an example. You can see for me here on the screen in terms of some of those key elements, lunch, key marketing, there's lots of white space there as well to absorb. Quadrant 1, the stuff that's important and urgent. And you'll notice family Zoom meetings on Friday, by the way, ALW YouTube. If you're not familiar with Andrew Lloyd Webber, he's launching all of his musicals online. It's fantastic. We did Phantom of the Opera just recently. Brilliant. Anyway, so coming back to planning your week. Now that's the easy bit, planning it in the diary. Then you have to show up. You've got to follow through with that commitment to yourself. You see on Friday, thinking time. If you don't have that commitment for yourself, it'll never happen. So are you planning that time in, ring fencing it, honoring it, and applying it? If you will, it'll start to make a difference. Starting the day. Again, don't get locked in. First thing in the morning, are we locking into social media? Avoid that. Now, I know working from home, a place of solitude and quiet, some of you are going to have to be creative with that, but find a place where you can do this. Again, that applies on the weekly planning as well. Again, evaluate yesterday, what's tripping over to today that didn't get done yesterday. A realistic list, the time versus task balance, okay? And looking at your time that you have available to be able to create a realistic to-do list. Now, to-do list, I know some of you have used or are currently using maximum of 5 things on a to-do list, really. So what are the 3 to 5 critical things that I need to do? To-do lists are kind of fun, typically. Build one on Monday, still good on Friday. Except it's what on Friday? Bigger and uglier. When we accomplish something on the list, what do? We tick it off. Why? Because it feels good. We've achieved something. And your brain releases a hormone, floods through your system, causing this euphoric high. What I'm suggesting then, if you want to be on a continual legal trip, a legal high, earn lots of ticks. Endorphins are released when people first fall in love. Have any of you ever had to work with somebody who's just been struck by Cupid's arrow? You know, 2 or 3 days, they don't need to eat. 4th day, they need a chicken sandwich. 10 years later, they'll be overeating. Anyway, so endorphins, make sure that we think about box 2, the stuff that's really important, but it's not urgent. We've got to be proactive here. Think about your roles and goals, learning and develop those key relationships. When should our long-term relationships be important? Always. When sometimes do they become important? When they're in trouble, sadly. This aspect of sharpening the saw, taking care of yourself. 7th habit of highly effective people from Stephen was this concept of sharpening the saw. You, physically, intellectually, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, the 5 dynamics. Looking at ourselves as a whole person. And it's not so much what exercise does for the body, it's what it does for your head. You'll be more creative, you'll think better, you'll feel better, everything just works better. But you've got to constantly, daily, weekly, constantly look at getting the balance right in terms of sharpening our saw. So in summary, putting first things first. Box 1, do it. Delegate wherever you possibly can, or don't do it at all. Make sure that we're minimizing that stuff, and diarize. Put those things in the diary, as Stephen Covey would say, your big rocks. Putting the first things first. So your attention, look at our energy levels, our attention, distractions, fragile things, ladies and gentlemen. You break an egg, how difficult is it to put back together? Very difficult. Look at the office environment. When we were back in the day, it's all about the location, as Phil and Kirsty would say, location, and now in a home environment, you know, we're going to be different situations. Some of us are working off kitchen tables, like my son-in-law, for example. Dedicated space, though, wherever you possibly can, see if you can get a dedicated space to be able to minimize some of the distractions and interruptions so that you can focus your performance and productivity here. Have conversations, agree the boundaries there. If you can, set yourself up for success with an office, with a door, with natural light, a place for everything in its place, everything on on your desk that you need to carry on your productive work. You've got all the plugs, the connections, you've got all the power sockets, you're all tooled up to be able to do that. I would encourage you to stand up. Sitting is the new smoking. You can really revolutionize your energy levels and your performance and productivity. You're 3 or 4 times more assertive on your feet than you are sat down. Lots of benefits from standing up. Setting boundaries with our key stakeholders, understanding they know and I know when am I going to start work and when am I going to stop work, so that we can redirect some of that time and energy. Be very clear with the expectations again, with all of the individuals, and maybe post them around. Formula One, some of you are familiar with this concept. The pit stop, the car comes in and all of the crew jump on the car, they deal with that, they refuel, retire it, but those few seconds even give the driver the opportunity to stop, replenish, rehydrate, breathe, think, and those seconds in the pit stop can make the difference between winning and losing. In a working environment, when we're working from home, we take a break, okay? So you need to plan in. The question is for you, are you regularly planning the breaks to stop and reflect? To take some hydration, to breathe, to recharge and recommit. Get outside, get a bit of exercise, get some hydration. I would encourage you to cut back on the carbs, get a healthier option. But look at ways on a regular basis that you're giving yourself that. How do you get dressed up for work? Well, you might not be booted and suited back in the day, showing my age there possibly. You might not wear a suit, but definitely the top part of you, and be aware of the stuff that's behind you, particularly when you're doing Zoom meetings, etc. So be prepared, okay? Get up as before, shower, etc. Have a proper nutritious breakfast. Use that valuable commuting time that you could redirect it into better elements of self-care. And my great friend, Paul McGee, of sumo fame, he said something great. You've seen that on the plane back in the day. The stewardess gives you the steward or the stewardess gives you the safety briefing, and they say if you have a dependent, the oxygen mask comes down, you put your mask on first before you help the dependent, because you can't help anybody else until you've helped yourself first. So self-care. So what can we do? Start your day differently if you haven't already. I would encourage you, Andy Puddingham's Headspace app. If you want to get into some real meditation there, that can really difference. I know some teams actually do a group meditation. BT, for example, my son-in-law I mentioned, they have a company-wide meditation 3 or 4 times a week where thousands, look at Joe Wicks online. They've got some great YouTube videos and tutorials, particularly if you've got the kids at home. Look at those podcasts, excuse me, TED Talks. Look at online learning. Read, music can also be a great way for yourself. Looking and using the great proliferation of communication tools at our disposal. Don't default into text or email. Rather get online with somebody on a regular basis daily, so that you can have at least some virtual connection through Zoom or whatever video channel that you have, because isolation can be a major issue in terms of getting things done. So there's some ideas for you to be able to protect, preserve, renew, and enhance your energy levels, your time, your attention, your focus. Hopefully you've got a couple of things down, and what we're going to do now is, if you respond to the survey that Bob and the team will send out, there's a couple of things that have come your way. You'll get a summary of the presentation here today. You'll also, if you want, get the copy of the ebook, Getting Your Inbox to Zero, and the opportunity to involve yourself in a one-to-one with us in a chat. So we want to say thank you for your time, energy, and attention. I trust that you found this a little bit of information useful to you. And I'm going to ask Bob now, and if you want to put anything in the Q&A, let's spend a few minutes answering any of your questions. I don't say we've got all the answers, but Bob and I and our network over 30 odd years, then we will get that answer back to you within, well, we'll say 48 hours. So let's deal with those, and Bob, you can help us with some of this.
I'll help you.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob.
You're very welcome. So, Jim, one question that's coming in, you might have a view on, is when I feel that all tasks are equally important. What's your view on whether all tasks are equally important? Well,
the reality is they're not. I know that sounds flippant, but the reality is nobody does it all. The aspect of prioritization. Now, there's again a couple of things that come into play there. Is this mission critical, and what is the deliverable? What is the time frame? The expectation? If we go back to Peter Drucker's SMART checklist, SMART, is it specific and measurable? And often when we're coaching executives, it's kind of vague and woolly. So if you can get some realistic, so for me, it's making it real in terms of time frame, but understanding what are the really wildly important goals, and then what are the activities around those. And we need to have the courage to say no. You know, and one of the traits of highly effective people is that they have that great balance between courage on the one hand, the willpower to say no, but also in consideration for others. And sometimes we need to retrain some of our customers, some of our key stakeholders, maybe our boss on occasion, who has maybe unrealistic expectations. But Bob, have you got any insight? You've done a lot of work in that area as well.
Yeah, I think we've got a comment from Richard, who also said that if they genuinely are all equal, then it doesn't matter which one you would pick. And I would agree with that. If you've got two things which are genuinely equal, or three things, it kind of doesn't matter which one you pick. I'd say pick the bolder one, pick the bigger one. But yeah, generally speaking, Pareto applies. So if you've got 10 things to do, then really 2 of them are the real juicy ones. So find a way of using Pareto's law or Pareto's rule. And if you want to learn a bit more of that, if you just type Pareto, Pareto, into Google, I'm sure you'll get more than enough.
Sure.
We've got another question coming in
from
Vernon, which is, how do I keep positive when working in the same space day in and day out? And I'm used to being out and about much, much more.
Yeah, some of us extrovert personality types, you know, this lockdown is a real challenge. So for me personally, it's all about environment and being able to mix it up where you possibly can. Music can be a major benefit for me personally in terms of keeping my mood on track, and then the daily and the weekly planning, where, as I talked about, pit stops and making breaks, making sure that you are mixing it up and changing the variety of activities during the day might help with that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I also change where I work from 3 times a day. So I have a standing desk platform which sits on top of other surfaces.
Well done, I wonder where you got that idea from.
From a guy called Jim. So I move that standing platform, and that means I move my office. Everything kind of comes with me. It's all kind of lean, mean, works together. And I will use the dining room kitchen area in the morning because the sun is the brightest. In the afternoon, it can get a little bit warmer, so I can move into the front room. And I can choose which room I work in, even if you only sit on the left-hand side instead of where you always sit on the right-hand side. Your peripheral vision picks up a different view, and that can change things. So I think the communication you've talked about with other people really helps with that. But physically changing where you work from, and with the good weather coming and a nice piece of shade, we should all be able to sit out in the garden and work as well. So hopefully
these are really good questions. These are really good questions. Thank you, team. Thank you.
We have another question
please.
from, which is, what time management chunks, asked Travis, would you break your day down to? 10-minute chunks, 15-minute chunks, 30-minute clusters?
I would hesitate to be so prescriptive. Some experts would say 15 to 20-minute bite-sized chunks, and the Pomodoro technique works good. Some of you have got that. It kind of looks. It's a timer that looks like a tomato. It's called the Pomodoro technique. So you can set it for 20-25 minutes, focused work, and then stop and come back to it. For others, it takes them 20 minutes to mentally get themselves up to speed to get in the zone, as it were. So know yourself and play around with that. What really works for me? Is it going to be 15 or 20-minute chunks? But I'd come back to the sacrosanct part of that is make sure that you are investing at least 20 to 30 minutes of mapping the week properly, formally, and then on a regular basis, 10 to 15 minutes every day to top and tail, and make sure that we are keeping ourselves realistic in terms of the working from home and all of the extra added distractions that we need to mitigate against. Your thoughts, Bob?
Yeah, I would agree. Breaking it down into two smaller chunks is a difficult thing. The brain works very effectively up to about 45 minutes. So after 45 minutes, the nervous energy levels and your brain uses a vast amount of calories, actually. So if you want to lose weight, then it's nervous work that uses a shed load of calories, not so much the physical muscles. So 45 minutes, I'd say, if you're doing intense brain work, that's probably the maximum. Physical work, it's more like 2.5 hours before you've got to kind of take a break and get some calories or a bit of sugar. So it's somewhere between that time. But I think if you're trying to list everything you're going to do every 10 or 15 minutes, you're overcooking the planning. I think you're better off with slightly larger chunks. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay. Well, on my watch, we're done in terms of time.
Yeah, but let's give value. We have one more question coming in, so let's answer that. How much of the week should I keep aside for the unexpected? Asks Alan.
Well, all of the research I've done over the last 20 odd years on this, the average is about 20%. 20% of your day, you need to, day and the week, you need white space in the diary to absorb some of that. And that's average, obviously. Some will need more. The further you go up the food chain, probably the more white space that you need to have in your diary. The problem is I coach many senior level executives, and they're just wall to wall commitments and meetings, and they haven't planned in that thinking time, that absorption time. But typically on average, it's about 20%. Bob, have you got a thought?
Yeah, I agree. The research from project management shows that projects go pear-shaped if more than 87% of time and resources are allocated. So yeah, from a project management point of view, you've got to have a buffer of over 10%. So it's somewhere between 13% and 20% of resources as well as time, because time is just one of the resources. We have another question, which is about what are your top tips in particular for remote working? And as I had the honor of being asked to contribute to the book Remote Working recently, number one, Amazon bestseller. Jim, is it okay if I give you my 5 top tips?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
So specifically from working from home, you have to have a routine, or forgive me, you have to. I'm laying my should on you. That's very unfair. It's a good idea to establish a routine and some self-discipline, and that means having a starting time and a finishing time. It makes far more sense, as Jim said, that you're far more organized, and with daily and weekly planning you can get yourself better organized, and that includes having the materials and the tools that you need to hand. Good Wi-Fi will make working from home so much easier, as would a standing desk option, as would good software like Teams or Zoom or Slack, 365. But in addition to that routine and discipline, you also need flexibility, because when little Mindy needs a cuddle, or little Freddie needs a Kit Kat, or the wife needs a hug, then we got to look after the people we're sharing this space with. Jim's absolutely right. You've got to establish physical and time boundaries, but you've got to work with the grain and not against the grain. So look after the children and the family first, and they will look after you. That's what we would say from a leadership point of view with our staff. Look after your staff first, and they will look after you. Jim's talked about planning. Of course, that takes goals, that takes focus, and everybody's focus probably much more in the shorter term these days. If you've got 90-day goals, which you can break into 30-day goals, weekly and daily goals, you've got a chance. Zoning time out during the day, Jim has already talked about. We've had a question about that as well. My third main tip on working from home, Jim's already covered: more communication. We need more time to talk to people and give them hugs, and doing that face-to-face on Zoom is a superb way to go. Beef up your problem solving, collaborate and find the smallest number of problems that are making the biggest impact on your own business right now, and work as a team to solve some of those and pivot the business. And better diet, better stress relief, and better exercise.
Yeah.
Please get some exercise. Please eat sensibly, otherwise we'll be adding to our waistlines during this time. Yeah. So Jim, have you got any other tips in particular about remote working?
I would just add to that, we can send a bunch of information, guys. I'm conscious of this precious resource that you've invested in. I hope that you've got some ahas there. Just keep the main thing is my closing message to us in all of those 4 areas. And Bob, you're going to send some, do you want to tell the folks about the follow-up?
Yeah, there's an automatic survey that will kick in as soon as we've exited this meeting. And that enables you to give us some feedback on the session itself, but it also enables you to register and say, yes, I'd like the follow-up material. Yes, I'd like a one-to-one. And you'll get a reminder of that in a day's time, and then communication about this particular webinar would stop. Do remember, we have 4 more webinars planned and other speakers coming on board, so that Thoughts on Thursdays will hopefully become a thing. So thank you from me. Jim, back to you to close.
Thank you very much, Bob, the team, and Be More Effective. Make it up, make it happen. Thank you and goodbye.